if you got all your news from the mainstream media, you honestly wouldn't know a single thing about what's happening at town halls in small towns and big cities all across this beautiful province. There is something afoot. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. And although I'm recording this on Monday morning, when this goes live on our website, the, I believe, single largest independence rally occurring indoors in our nation's history will be taking place in Calgary at the Big Four building. Joining me now is independence influencer, but you know him as a Convoy lawyer too, Keith Wilson, to talk about the independence movement and what is happening in this province, because I've been to these petition signings where they're attempting to gather 177,000 signatures in the statutory 120 days. I think we're about nearing a month into it. It's not the old, miserable, angry white men that the mainstream media would have us all believe. I've gone out there to talk to them, unlike the mainstream media. Keith, thanks for coming on the show. What is your sense of who are the proponents of Alberta independence?
Well, I think it's Albertans who are very much alive to what's going on in Canada and alive to what's going on in the world around them, and that are acutely concerned about the future for themselves, but more importantly, their children and their grandchildren. They're concerned about, some of them, if they're at a retirement or close to retirement age, they're concerned about what the cost of living continual increases are under the Liberals with their failed policies. And they're concerned about what's going to happen to their investments. So they're invested in this problem, and they're invested in the solution. You know, one of the things that you may have encountered, Sheila, when you go to one of these signing events and see the long lines and the people in it, is the energy, the camaraderie, the hope, but also the steely determination. So, Albertans are very much alive to the problems that the federal government has created, the growing dysfunction, the growing divide within our country, both culturally, economically, and they're prepared to embrace a very significant change, which is to become an independent country. Not the 51st state, as Trump may want, but rather an independent country.
You know, it's a complete cross-section of who and what Alberta is when you go to these things. You've got young families, you've got guys who are racing there after work in their coveralls, you've got new Canadians and boomers, because I think our boomers are drastically different than the boomers in Eastern and Central Canada. The ones I talk to at these independent signings are saying to me, Sheila, I may never see the fruits of what we're trying to achieve here, but we have to do it for our grandchildren. And then I think of the Eastern boomers and that guy that gave the young people the finger because they wanted a different version of Canada. You can really see the stark cultural divide when you go to these petition signings between what's happening in the West and what's happening in the East.
Absolutely. And I think, and you can see it in the legacy media. It's just remarkable, the distortions. They're really creating a fiction that they're feeding. And come on, why would that even be surprising? I'm catching myself here. It's not like they get their revenue from actually selling a newspaper or advertising in it or commercials on television anymore. I mean, they get a little bit of that, but the point is a little bit. They get huge hundreds of millions of dollars worth of funding from the federal government. So they are effectively, and they behave as such, a propaganda arm of the state. They have more similarities to a newsreader in North Korea than they do to what a journalist is supposed to be coming out of journalism school. I don't even know why we have journalism schools in Canada anymore, because the only journalists left are folks like you and the crew at Rebel and other independent media outlets. So We're seeing the effects of that, and what it's doing, because so many Albertans, and I think those in the West and Saskatchewan as well, are awake to what's going on. Once you see the emperor without his clothes, you can't unsee that. You don't magically paint clothes back on this naked person. And I've tried to watch a couple times CBC and other things, and the first thing I say to myself when I watch the news reader is, I say to myself, that's not how you talk in the real world.
Right.
In other words, I've met you in person, Sheila. How you're talking to me in the audience is how you speak, right? Whereas these news readers, they put on this, and breaking news today, and da 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 da. That's not how they talk. They don't sit around the kitchen table and say to one of their children, "Please pass the ketchup," right?
Right.
It's fake right down to that level. And I think so many people are seeing through it, but so many aren't. When we get into other parts of the country, they buy everything. Carney's great, even though he hasn't achieved a thing other than, more air miles points than any other sitting prime minister.
I'm glad you brought up the lies of the mainstream media. And I shouldn't complain too much, because as long as they lie, I'll always have a job. But they are lying to people who know that the mainstream media lies now. And as you say, you can't paint the clothes back on the emperor. They aren't even trying anything new these days. You see the exact same lies directed at the independence movement that we saw directed at the Convoy movement. Nobody believed it then. They're sure as heck not going to believe it the second time around. They're using, that this is Russian funded. They're saying it's foreign interference, anything but the grassroots movement of severely normal people who are tired of having the boot of the federal government on their back.
Well, they have a hard time believing. I guess if you're a liberal and a federalist, you'll only do something if you're paid.
Right.
You won't do something for free and volunteer your time because you think it's important, I guess. I don't know why they keep having to put these propositions forward. The amount of volunteer time that I've put in, that I know everybody around me that I interact with on a regular basis has put in, is astronomical, because we believe we're at an existential turning point. We're either going to create this place called Alberta that's livable and prosperous and a place where our children can achieve their potential, or we're all getting out. We'll be like so many who've left the country and go elsewhere. So we're motivated. We don't need money. We don't need the Russians or anybody else to fund anything. And it's just simply not what's happening at all. The legacy media is doing the handiwork for their paymaster, their employer, which is the head of their employer is a fellow by the name of Mark Carney, a short little fellow. And he's the head of the federal government, and they pay these guys salaries, and they make sure that they're paymaster. A perfect example of the extreme of this is the Federal Court of Appeal ruling almost 2 weeks ago now, by a unanimous ruling by 3 justices of the Federal Court of Appeal, so all appointed, probably all by Liberals, a stinging rebuke of excesses of government power, of excesses of government decision-making, of abuse of power, of breach of charter rights of Canadians on a scale that is probably unprecedented. And traditionally, under the Westminster system, we have the principle of ministerial responsibility, where, what happened years ago in the previous era, Minister Bev Oda spent too much money on a glass of orange juice and she had to resign. In other words, if you do something, you're responsible for a policy failure, or you're involved in a decision that's unlawful or results in breach of charter rights, traditionally the concept of being a right honorable minister, right honorable, right, implies a high ethical standard. that you would resign. Not only have there been no resignations, there's been no calls for resignations, short of me and a few other people calling for it on Twitter, on X. And the legacy media hasn't at a single point scrummed. In the old days, I was interviewed by Brian Lilly, and he used to be, a reporter in those scrums, both federally and provincially. Or no, sorry, it was Rick Bell who was provincial, but Brian Lilly, who was federal. And, they would hound when the ministers came out of some meeting. They would say, Mr. Minister, what's your response to the court's ruling? Are you going to resign? What do you say to Canadians in view of the court saying that you broke the law, right? And nothing. It's like, oh, Prime Minister, where are we traveling to next, sir? So Canada is the Canada that we dream about, we romanticize, does not exist.
Yeah. And, if we want to hold these people to account, by we, I mean independent media, we have to fly to Davos to get anywhere near them, to ask them questions, as was the case with Ezra asking Freeland about her role in the illegal invocation of the Emergencies Act. I'm glad you brought up Bev Oda, because the difference between Bev Oda and her $16 orange juice and the rest of these unethical liberal liars is the pressure for Bev Oda to really resign came from fellow conservatives who didn't appreciate the optics of it all, meaning that there are values that conservatives have that they hold their leaders and their MPs to, and the liberals have just this tribalist loyalty to power at all costs, no matter what. And so they won't call for the resignation of their own if it jeopardizes that stranglehold that they have on power, because that is really their only ideology. Well,
and the net result of that, and I've seen that before here provincially, during the Stelmach era, previous Stelmach, was people were rewarded for their loyalty, not for their competence. And then policies and the administration that was occurring started to fail. And we've seen that on scale. Think back to 2015 when Justin Trudeau, the drama teacher, became the leader of the country of Canada, and how badly things have gone. There's no expectation for competency. It's all about loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Justin Trudeau's biggest portfolio that his own party trusted him with before he became the prime minister was, I think, the official critic for amateur sport. Like, they're like, you should be in charge of this place. Yeah, not a great plan. I want to ask you about, because I know you probably have a very busy day today, the BQ leader, Blanchette. He is being treated with the utmost respect by the mainstream media. He's an avowed separatist. For some reason, he gets treated like his ideas are reasonable and that separatism is a constant and even achievable thing for the people of Quebec. But Alberta separatism is constantly written off as some sort of regional arrogance. And what are your reasons for this? For me, I think, well, it's because the Liberals need Quebec to win.
Well, there's that, but there's a, if you map out from the start of Confederation, each federal election and go, was it liberal, was it conservative? It'll be like liberal, 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 conservative, liberal, liberal, conservative, liberal, 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 conservative, liberal, conservative, liberal, liberal. You quickly realize that the natural governing party of Canada is the Liberal Party.
Sure.
Because of the electoral math. And part of the electoral math is skewed by Quebec and Ontario, heavily influenced by the common phrase of the Laurentian elite. So the Venn diagram would put the separatists in an overlap. The Quebec separatists would have put them in an overlap with the Laurentian elite, whereas the Venn diagram overlay of Alberta Albertans seeking independence circle is far, far away.
You're on the other page.
Way, way off. Yeah. Yeah. There's not enough room on the page to get even a little bit of the circle. So that's why. I mean, it's part of who the media now believes it needs to serve in order. Look, when people get a job and they work for an employer, the natural right thing to do is to want to please your employer.
Sure.
And the employer of the reporters in the legacy media is the federal government headed by Mark Carney. So anything and his whole look at his cabinet, and it's skewed towards Quebec. It's remarkable. And not only that, when I compared the list of cabinet ministers who are in Carney's cabinet today with the list of cabinet ministers who were in Trudeau's cabinet in February 2022 when the invocation of the Emergencies Act occurred unlawfully and thousands of Canadians had their charter rights breached. There's 7 cabinet ministers, most of whom are from Quebec, that were in both cabinets, right? So it's a cabal.
Yep. It's a big party and we're not in it. And I'm not sure I even want to be invited to it. I'm glad you brought up the Quebec issue, because one of the things that I hear at these town halls is that people are really angry about. And I think it is a cultural issue. The gun grab, that we are being scapegoated for the failings of progressive cities and liberal policies in other parts of the country. But moreover, to your point about constantly appeasing Quebec appears to be the only province who thinks this is a good idea. And yet the Liberals are going to expend so much political capital to try to push this thing down the rest of our throats.
Well, I was been puzzled by this gun grab thing. So I did some research. Like, why are they doing this? It's obvious on its face. The driver for whether or not a gun is allowed to still be legally used by trained, licensed, and vetted gun owners is whether or not it has black plastic features or black metal features is largely the test, right?
Yeah.
It's the scary looking gun law. If you replace them with some nice mahogany or oak, I guess it would be okay. But so what's driving this? I was puzzled. And remarkably, my research indicated that over 80% of Quebec, and some polls 86% of Quebecers, fully support this.
Yep.
And it could be for a number of reasons. The more left-lean socialist type thinking that pervades Quebec. But it's also because of the tragedies they had with some of the mass shootings, I believe. Mm-hmm. Well, then make the law for Quebec.
Yeah.
But it illustrates another point. And this point is becoming more clear in my mind as each month and each week goes by, which is Canada is not the optimal unit for a country. It's too big. It's too diverse culturally. The gun grab's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too diverse regionally, economically. Example there would be the trade-off that China forced the government into with auto manufacturing versus prairie farmers, right? If Alberta was a country and Saskatchewan was a country, and Ontario decided to put a tariff on EVs, it wouldn't have an impact on canola because we don't make EVs and we don't want to make EVs, electric vehicles. And the analogy I came up with, I'm still trying to come up with a better one, is this whole concept of Canada being too big to be optimal and even governable. We're seeing that. Poilievre's always got to pivot to the center. Those of us out here in the prairies lose our mind. It's like, Pierre, speak truth to power, and then it gets all watered down because it's got to sell in Quebec and Eastern Canada and far Eastern Canada. So here's an analogy. Edmonton has 1.1 million people, and I'm going to guess probably has, this is a silly analogy, but I think it'll make the point, probably has 25 McDonald's restaurants. Okay. Well, why not just have one? Why not just have one big, huge McDonald's somewhere in Edmonton to
Right.
service 1.1 million people? Because it's not optimal. It's not optimal. It's not efficient. It's not peak performance. They've determined over years what the optimal size is and what the optimal market distance is around each one to maximize the convenience and efficiency for the customer and for the business, right? Well, I really believe the optimal size for people in Alberta to be governed by is the province of Alberta. In other words, make the province a country. We have sufficient land mass. We have the third largest reserve of oil and gas in the world. We have an abundance of resources. We'll be one of the richest countries in the world. We have the know-how. We have the drive. We have the entrepreneurial spirit. We have the infrastructure. We have the leading edge technology in all areas, and all of these things going for us. It gives us leverage to deal with current landlocked barriers that are policy locks, such as BC through the federal government. And so I think the optimal size for, at least for Alberta to be governed, is actually commensurate with the boundaries of Alberta. Canada's too big. Our views, our culture are too diverse. Our economies are too regional in nature, where the government's forced to trade one against the other. It's a suboptimal situation. And we're witnessing the effects of it. Our decline is spectacular. The only thing that's increasing is lineup at food banks and poverty and despair.
Yeah, we had a far wealthier middle class under Stephen Harper than we do right now. The decline of the middle class has been catastrophic in this country. And the Liberals keep saying, we got to do something about it. Well, I hope you guys find the people in charge and responsible for what's happened to this country in the last 10 years. They pretend like they are passive bystanders in this mess, and the people in the East keep voting that way.
Well, look at what, I was occasionally, about once a week, maybe, I do a post on X when Prime Minister's like, I'm traveling to so-and-so, and, we're going to build the Canadian economy, build it back. We're high-paying jobs, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, if you really believe that, if that's really your goal, the first thing you will do, like today, is announce that you're going to repeal the amendments to the Environmental Assessment Act, which are often referred to as Bill C-69 or the No More Pipelines Act. That law doesn't just apply to pipelines. It applies to any big project.
Right.
And it has ridiculous features in it. They could simply repeal those ridiculous features they added to it and go back to the law that existed prior to 2016. And that would make it easier for investors to make the decision to make the investment decisions in Canada that have driven them away, right? So he's traveling to these different places. And I could just imagine him sitting down with some investors, whoever they might be, and they say, well, yeah, but are we still? So one of the things that Bill C-69 did is it requires someone proposing to do a major project to assess the impact of the project on the intersection of gender, sex, gender, and other minority identity factors.
Yes, the GBA+.
No lawyer, no expert, no bureaucrat can agree on what even the phrase intersection means there and how it's to be applied, other than agreeing it's not a thing with a stoplight at it, right? And so the investor could easily look across at him if they're sophisticated and did look at investing in Canada, or maybe we're about to and pulled out, and could say, Prime Minister, no one can meet this test. It's an impossible test to meet. It brings incredible risk and cost. Are you going to remove that? And he's obviously going to say no. When you look at all of the barriers and policies they've put in place that have driven investment away, what's the point in accumulating all these air miles and going to all of these other countries and trying to do trade deals if we can't build the plants, the facilities, the mines, the processing facilities in the first place because of your stupid policies. So I really think that these trips are about his ego. He just
Completely.
wants to show off, show himself off. When when a 20-year-old gets a new car, they want to drive it to their friends and say, "Hey, look at my new car." And they drive over to their other friend's house, right? "Look at my new car." His new car is him as prime minister with his security detail and flying in our Canadian jet. And I think he just wants to fly around, and I love these action shots. Like, they always have these put together, these highly produced clips, and he's always moving, or he's walking around and pointing. And I just have this Kim Il, whatever
Nobody's
his
there.
name is, from North Korea vibe, the dear leader. Next thing you know, we're gonna have people around him with little notepads so they can write down everything the dear Carney says. I mean, that's where it feels like we're going.
Yeah, we're this far away from him on a mountaintop on a white horse, like Kim Jong-un.
And they'll make sure it's a really small white horse, so he looks
exactly.
big.
So he looks big instead of like a frail little old lady like he does. I don't think a lot of people know. If you're in the know, but a lot of people are aware that for these major companies to invest in a major project in Canada, they basically have to ask the local feminist busybodies how the project makes them feel. And if you are a multinational oil company, you look at that, or you just say, well, maybe I can just flip a few bucks to the local Algerian warlord and my project gets done. Why would you invest here? Why would you?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You won't. And they're not.
They aren't.
They aren't.
Yeah.
We don't even have to be hypothetical about it. I take your point. It's happening. It's hundreds of millions of or billions of dollars of investment have fled, and the head offices are leaving. I mean, he moved Brookfield out,
right?
His company, right?
And his family.
So it's just terrible what these liberals have done to the country. Alberta has a path forward. We don't have to stay on this crazy train, and more Albertans are realizing that.
I agree. Now, Keith, I wanted to ask you about treaties, but I realize I'm up against the clock, but I know you frequently answer questions like this on your YouTube channel and on your social media account. So tell people, if they don't already know, how they can find you.
Sure. A couple months ago, I started a YouTube channel to try and provide accurate, balanced legal and other information on what's happening with independence in Alberta. And you can just simply search my name in YouTube, Keith Wilson KC. And then I'm on X at I.K. Wilson. And I'm very prolific there in terms of providing information as well.
Great. Keith, thanks so much for coming on the show. Are you going to be in Calgary tonight?
I can't. I have client meetings all afternoon today, so I'll be watching with great enthusiasm.
Well, we're sending a Rebel News team. We wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. Keith, thanks so much for coming on the show and speaking up for Albertans who just want a better way.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Stay with us. Your letters to Ezra, unceremoniously read by me, up after the break.